Journalist from far left news organization tweets out President Trump is getting ready to have concentration camps. Pope Francis tells Michael Moore apparently that capitalism is a sin. President Trump stirs up the controversy once again by alluding to military actions taking place if the migrants in the caravan act out. And lastly, China is at it again with cyber terrorism, but not in the U.S. this time, in Taiwan. And I'll tell you why this is vital for you and I to know. Now, starting off with the journalist Aaron Rupar, who works for the far-left news organization Think Progress. And he tweeted out on Halloween, October 31st, the following. Trump promises concentration camps and indefinite detention for border crossers. And this is a quote from President Trump within the tweet. One other thing, important, we're not doing any releases anymore. We'll build tent cities. Whatever we have to build in terms of housing, we're not doing releases. Now, I do not understand where Rupar is getting the idea that President Trump is trying to start up a concentration camp. And the reason I say that is because what President Trump is alluding to in his statement here is the catch and release process that happened under the Obama administration, where they wouldn't prosecute the illegal immigrants. They would just detain them and then release them. So President Trump is making sure that we're not going to do that again, because there have been a handful of times where the illegal immigrants who were released ended up coming back in the country and killing people or committing other kind of crimes. Now, obviously, that's not the norm, it's the anomaly, but it occurs, and that is something that we can prevent from happening if we follow our own laws, which was not occurring. So President Trump is stating that we are going to make sure that we're enforcing our laws like we weren't before. However, this is the rhetoric in which spews hatred on the left and makes references to Nazi Germany and tries to equate that to President Trump, which just doesn't make sense. And the reason I say it doesn't make sense is because not once has President Trump called for any type of military action or action of the nation to come against a particular racial or ethnic group. Not once has he done that. Hitler did that. So President Trump has never done that. Also, concentration camps are for typically political prisoners and minorities who are being oppressed by a tyrannical government and being forced to do labor and or awaiting execution. So neither of those things are happening. Like I've stated, he's just saying that we need to follow the laws, and if they're breaking the laws, we need to punish them for breaking the laws. He's not talking about opening up concentration camps. He has no agenda to start wiping out a complete, a religious or an ethnic group whatsoever. But for whatever reason, we can keep alluding to that as the left has done. But let's not forget the only side of the political spectrum that can stir up controversy are Republicans and right-wingers of any kind. They're the only ones to blame. So, this right here is exactly why President Trump calls the press the enemy of the people. I don't agree with his wording. I don't want to say all press are the enemy of the people. And I don't think it's fair to really say press are the enemy of the people. I think the press are really, at least most of the press and the mainstream media, are really left-leaning and are just activists more so than reporters and political analysts. They're just activists. So I'm not saying I don't think that they have any terrible agenda on the people, but they definitely do produce fake news and misleading information and contribute to stirring the pot when it comes to the heated political rhetoric that's going on right now. Also, I cannot not blame President Trump as well for his rhetoric and referring to the press as the enemy of the people. I don't think that's fair on his part to do either. And I think both the president and the media need to do a better job at trying to unify. Now, when things like this come out on the left-wing organizations, we will not hear about this in the mainstream media. We will not hear about the facts regarding concentration camps. We will not be educated on how World War II was brought about us. We won't talk about any of those things. Instead, we'll just push a conspiracy theory that President Trump has an evil mastermind plan to oppress minorities and to help the wealthy and make his and get richer from the presidency, although he's actually lost a tremendous amount of money since taking this job, and has appointed numerous women and numerous people of color to positions within the administration and also in military branches, etc. So, not only that, but his daughter and his son-in-law are Jewish. Come on now. How can you equate him to Hitler when his daughter and son-in-law and presumably his grandchildren are Jewish? That just doesn't make any sense to me. It really doesn't. So I don't think this helps out at all, and I think this is sick. I think this is something that everybody should be against right here. This type of rhetoric, because it's false, it is completely misleading, and you have a responsibility as a journalist to actually report on the news in an objective way as opposed to trying to push your party's agenda. You would think that's what people will be doing as journalists, but that's not what's happening anymore. That's not what's happening anymore, unfortunately. Now, in other news, Michael Moore was on a talk show. I believe this is Steve Meyer's talk show. And he was talking about him meeting with Pope Francis 2 weeks ago. And he said the following. This is a quote from Caleb Hall, his Twitter. Let's see here. Apparently, he's a senior editor for the UR. And this is a quote from Michael Moore. It states, "And I said, so you believe capitalism, the kind of capitalism we have now, is a sin?" He goes, "Yes, it is." He said, "The poor must always come first." So Pope Francis apparently thinks capitalism is a sin. Now, I am no I'm no expert when it comes to religion, by no means, but what I do know is that capitalism is anything but a sin. And the reason I say that is capitalism is the reason over half of the world right now is out of poverty. Yeah, you heard that right. Over half of the world is no longer in poverty. That is incredible. We did that within 10 years. That was a goal of ours, and we did it within 10 years, thanks to the free market. Actually, poverty is predicted to be completely eliminated off the face of this earth by 2030. How, you may ask? The free market. What is the free market? The free market is capitalism. You know what else capitalism provides you and I? It provides me this microphone, provides me that cell phone that I'm recording this on, and it provides you the cell phone or whatever device you're listening to this on or watching this on. And it also is the reason you and I can communicate over social media. It's the reason I can pick up my phone and see my mother or my father's face when I decide to FaceTime them all the way in Michigan when I'm here in Ohio. It allows me to do that. Also, it allows me to try and become my own boss. It allows me to try to start my own company. It allows you to try to start your own company and start your own business and make some capital from that, and also help people in the process of doing so. It allows you and I to own property. That's a beautiful thing on the free market. Private property, private ownership. Unfortunately, people demonize private ownership because they equate it to corporations and not being restricted on the government and not being at the whim of the people. So, in reality, capitalism is the only reason you and I have any kind of amenities in our lives and are not in need of much in America. When it comes down to it, people aren't in need of much when it comes to America. Yeah, you can always have more. The grass is always greener on the other side, right? But when it comes down to it, the free market is the way to go. Is it perfect? No, not by a stretch of the imagination. Because it is true that it does dispossess people. However, you're going to dispossess people any way you cut it. And the reason I say that is because every social activity we do has a hierarchical structure to it. And so, if we only have socialism, what happens then is that you take away from the other avenues or hierarchies, if you want to refer to them that way, where you and I can compete in. Because then what happens is that under socialism, the government is running everything. So that means for healthcare, the government provides it to you. For housing, the government provides it to you. Education, the government provides it to you. Work, the government's providing that to you as well. And how are they paying for all these services? Because presumably, the doctors aren't working for free. The teachers aren't working for free. The real estate people aren't working for free. How are they paying all these things? How are they paying for property? Well, taxes. And so then you may ask, well, if you're working for the government and you're being taxed, so basically you're working to have all these services provided to you by the government and have no other option on where to get those services from. So all your money you're working, all the money you're making goes towards the government, whether it's taxed or not taxed. That's not good. What that creates is a state of dependency. And in a state of dependency, that means you give all the power to the government. Not good. We can all imagine the horrific things that can come out of that. As a matter of fact, we don't even need to imagine and try to create fictional scenarios. All we have to do is just go back and read 20th century history. We'll find out then that socialism has never worked. You know, the Nazis, which President Trump is alluded to all the time, yeah, they were socialist. They were socialist. But, you know, they incorporated that with fascism. You know, Lenin, you know, Stalin. Well, the way they all started their communistic reign is by socialism. And you know what happened in China? Socialism and communism. And you know how many deaths are contributed from socialism? Oh, like millions. Millions. When it comes to communism, you have approximately 100 million people dying due to that regime. And socialism, all it is the vehicle to get a extreme political ideology to either communism or fascism. And it stifles all the innovation, keeps everything within the government, so you don't have any other options. But when it comes to capitalism, going back to the whole hierarchy thing, guess what happens? Under socialism, you only have one hierarchy, so people are typically dispossessed because the government has to provide you with everything, so typically everybody's poor because you know how expensive it is to provide millions of individuals with healthcare, education, jobs, housing. On top of that, paying the people who provide it. The cycle doesn't work. It's not sustainable in the long run. What is capitalism, and the reason it is because it allows for multiple hierarchical structures to be set in place, and for you to create your own hierarchical structure. And you may ask, how can I create my own hierarchical structure? Well, for instance, the invention of the smartphone created a whole nother hierarchy in technology, created a whole nother field for people to ascend to. The thing is that the free market is demonized because it requires personal responsibility. And you know how difficult it is for most people to make responsible decisions on a day-to-day basis. It is incredibly difficult. And I am not saying it to belittle or demonize any individual or any group of people who have trouble in our economic system. I say this because I am very empathetic to their situation and to some of them who are in a very difficult situation. And the reason I am is because it is very hard to go about and make all the decisions in your life. You have to figure out what career you want to have. You want to figure out if you can even be an employee. You know, do you have what it takes to work for somebody else, or do you have to try to make something on your own? Right? Or, and you have to find out what school you're going to go to. If you're going to go to school, you have to find out what health insurance you're going to have, who you're going to work for. You have to find out what house you're going to own. You have to pay your own bills. You're responsible for your own vehicle, transportation, food. Those are all things that you are obligated to do in a free market society. And that's freedom. That means you have freedom in a capitalistic economic structure. And you know what you don't have under socialism is freedom. Now, like I said, I am no theologist, no expert when it comes to religion. But which one sounds sinful to you? Is it the one that allows for individual freedom, or is it the one that doesn't allow for individual freedom? I think we all agree that the former, the one that allows for individual freedom, is the one that isn't sinful. So that statement was really absurd, I thought, especially coming from the Pope, who I assume is a very intelligent man. Going off of the assumption that he was able to ascend to the position he's in right now, you would have to, at least entertain the thought that the dude's pretty smart, right? He has to be. He has to be. Now, also in this interview, Michael Moore states that white men, angry white guys, need to give it up and give power to women. Just give up and give power to the women. Give power to the other minority groups. Let somebody else rule for a change. And I think this should offend people. And the reason I say that is because this just shows the sheer ignorance when it comes to history in the media. And the reason I say that is because they portray it as if white guys are the only ones that have dominated the world and are still the only ones dominating the world. Have they forgot what's going on in Asia? Have they? Have they forgot about any of history when it comes to the Eastern Hemisphere? What about in Central and South America? What about in the Middle East? We're only saying white men are running the world when in reality the second superpower is Chinese. They're a person of color. They're people of color. Also, one of the one of the biggest, not biggest, but one of the strongest empires back in the day was the Ottoman Empire, and that was a Arabic group. What about the Mongols? They're Asian. And it goes on and on and on and on and on. And I think this is honestly historically ignorant on his behalf to state that white men are the only ones who have had power for the past 10,000 years. That is insane. That is purely insane. Not only that, but you want them to give up, but what about you, man? Michael Moore in particular. The dude's worth like $50 million. And you know how he got rich? By making movies. And the only reason he was able to make movies is because of capitalism. These people are freaking irritating. The individuals, when I say these people, I mean the individuals who think capitalism is evil and that socialism is the only answer is the only answer for everything. It's completely insane to me, and it's wrong. And it's wrong, and it makes you just wonder, what agenda do they have? Because obviously they can't be stupid, because they know they've gotten their riches off of capitalism. What kind of agenda do they have if they want socialism where the government runs everything? You're a slave to the state. That's what you are under socialism. Under capitalism, you have the liberty to decide what you want to do, who you want to be, where you want to go in life. Under socialism, you don't have that choice. You have one option for everything. You want to go to the doctor? You have to go to a government. You want to go to school? Provided to you by the government. And so then guess what? Everything can become manipulated if it's all run by the government. So these statements made by Michael Moore and people on the left are extremely, extremely irritating and just show historical ignorance. And I implore anybody who believes capitalism is evil and socialism or communism are the way to go, to read a history book regarding the 20th century. Read something about Nazi Germany. Read something about the Soviet Union. Read something about Maoist China. Seriously, do some research on that if you think, and if what I've said hasn't given you enough motivation to change your opinion, then I would definitely recommend you do your own research on that topic in particular. Now, the last thing I want to go over today is a press conference President Trump had yesterday that has caused a lot of controversy, and people in the media are running with this and saying that President Trump said that he will allow the military to shoot the migrants that are coming over. And this is what President Trump said. This is a tweet from NBC News. All right.
I hope not. It's the military. I hope there won't be that. But I will tell you this, anybody throwing stones, rocks, like they did to Mexico and the Mexican military and Mexican police, when they badly hurt police and soldiers of Mexico, we will consider that a firearm. Because there's not much difference when you get hit in the face with a rock, which, as you know, it was very violent a few days ago, very, very violent. That break-in, it was a break-in in a country. They broke into Mexico. And you look at what's happening in Guatemala, just to mention Guatemala, along with El Salvador and Honduras. It's disgraceful that those countries aren't able to stop this, because they should be able to stop it before it starts. And the United States pays them a fortune. And we're looking at not doing that anymore, because why should we be doing that when they do nothing for us? You know?
Exactly. To that whole latter part he said. He hit the nail right on the head with that one. There is no debating that right there. We give them tons of money and foreign aid, and they still cannot keep their own citizens within their country and provide a stable economy and a governmental structure for them to stay in their own country. Not saying we don't want them. That's not what I'm saying. What I'm getting at is that they can't even provide livable situations for their own citizens, and we provide them money still. Now, what he said that obviously stirred up more controversy was when he stated, I will tell you this, anybody throwing stones, rocks, we will consider that a firearm because there's not much difference when you get hit in the face with a rock. What he's alluding to, obviously, is that self-defense. If they start throwing rocks, we're going to open fire. He didn't say that, which he's right in saying in today's news, that he never said to shoot, which he never did. He just said that if they're throwing rocks, they're throwing stones, the military has the right to defend itself. They do. And another thing that wasn't covered here, but the media is attacking him on, is sending upwards of 15,000 troops to the border. Now, they're going crazy because they're saying, why is he sending so many people down to the border when, these are all women and children and people seeking asylum? Obviously, there are men in there and they include the men, but typically they're just people looking for asylum, and they're fleeing from violence, and they don't cause any trouble. But they forget about the fact that the caravan has grown to an estimated 14,000 people. Mind you, not all of those 14,000 people will be making it to the border, I'm sure. But I'm sure a decent percentage of them will be, and therefore that requires more security and more protection at that border, especially if they try to treat our border the way they treated the Mexican border and just and attempt to plow through it. What do we do then if they start throwing stones at the military and maybe kill somebody? You can kill somebody if you hit them with a rock in the head. And you want them to do nothing and sit there and take it? I'm not advocating they shoot anybody. I hope this doesn't happen, and I hope if they do throw rocks, that there's a way for them to detain them in a non-lethal manner. However, how can you and I sit back and judge from a position of comfort? We're not in that situation. We're not having rocks flinged at our head. We don't know if it's life or death. We don't know the adrenaline that goes through your body in that situation. So how can we say that that would be the wrong course of action? I don't know what the right course of action would be, but I know the right thing, and I know this. I know that the way for this to go rightly is if nobody gets hurt. For it to go correctly, nobody gets hurt. That would be the right thing. But that's not guaranteed, and it's already shown that some of these migrants are hostile individuals. So we'll see exactly what goes on with that. And the last thing I want to touch on is the Chinese government is attempting to infiltrate the elections in Taiwan. And now the reason you and I need to worry about this is because China, North Korea, and Russia are all hacking into Taiwan right now. Is essentially a test run for them to attempt to hack into the American election system. That's what they're working to do. And China's the biggest threat when it comes to that once again. And they're going at it with Taiwan. And actually, they're doing this at a time where Taiwan is having local elections. And China's not only trying to infiltrate and commit cyber terrorism over there, but has even made pro-Beijing political parties so that way they can oppose Taiwan's democracy and try to restore communism in Taiwan and bring it back to a one-nation rule where Taiwan is no longer independent. Now, Taiwan has asked for help from Interpol, which is a general assembly that basically enforces laws pertaining to cyber terrorism and things of that nature. And China's actually in Interpol. Yeah. And they've actually denied Taiwan access to Interpol before, and there's speculation that it's because of China's decision to do so. Now, China's not only upset because Taiwan is claiming independence, but they're also upset because they're backing and supporting us and taking arms from us in an arms deal worth over $300 million. So this really does have a lot to do with us as well. And it's because China is practicing infiltrating into elections on Taiwan as well as other countries. So we'll see exactly where this goes. And before I leave, I just have to add this, that China has tried to hack into the election system and infiltrate their internet in Taiwan up to 20 to 40 million times in 2017. That is not an exaggeration. That is from the Bloomsburg article I am reading right now. 20 to 40 million times they've attempted to hack into Taiwan's internet in their elections. So this is scary stuff, man. They're really trying to work on it. But that's what we have for the news today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Hope you learned something. And if you have any suggestions on a topic you would like me to cover, please let me know and I'd be happy to do so. And I hope you all have a wonderful Friday. Peace.